Good morning, everyone. This is T. Falcon Napier. I hope you're all doing quite well. Today we begin a 4-session series on ChangeWorks Essentials. ChangeWorks Essentials is the core training program for ChangeWorks practitioners. And so just to help you guys better understand how our professional track works, when someone goes through Mastering Personal Change, we consider that to be kind of like the member level program, the consumer level program. It's suitable for John and Jane public to go through and benefit from. But obviously, we are hoping through our community outreach that we meet the professionals who will ultimately choose to use this material with their clients. And for those individuals, we offer a professional track. The first step of that professional track is this program. So becoming a ChangeWorks practitioner. And we call the core training program for that ChangeWorks Essentials. People that are working with the individual clients in the capacity of being a coach or an individual trainer of some sort, this is the perfect program for you. If you work with groups, then the next level, which is Master Practitioner, would allow you to use the ChangeWorks system for doing detailed profiles of any population. And so whether that's a corporate client who's got a group of people that you'll be working with, or whether it's a research project you want to do, if your goal is to understand what's happening with the level of productive tension that a group is experiencing, then the level 2 training, or what we call ChangeWorks Advanced, is right for you. And completing that puts you up for master practitioner. And then beyond that, for people who actually want to teach the tension management program, so actually put on anything from a keynote to a 3-4 day program on the tension management skills, they become ChangeWorks trainers. That's level 3. They go through a program called ChangeWorks Expert. So all the details for that is available on the website, and I'll point you to that as I give you a little bit of orientation to what you're going to be looking at and doing on this program. But this is, again, ChangeWorks Essentials, core training for ChangeWorks practitioners. It does assume that you've gone through Mastering Personal Change, so you understand the basics about creating an activity list. You understand the 5 levels of productive tension. You understand how to perform some basic upgrade and downgrade maneuvers to better manage your level of tension. Now, from that, we're going to be expanding things in a rather significant level. The program for this, there's these 4 sessions. The first one's going to be about creating an individual profile. That's different than your personal profile. This is a profile you're creating for another individual. So we're going to be talking about a much higher level I'm going to say professionalism, around the creation of an activity list and getting people to actually fill the profile out. This afternoon, we'll be talking about the 16 energies and the different engagement rings. So looking at 2 other layers of the ChangeGrid in much more detail, in combination with the layer you learned during Mastering Personal Change about the 5 levels of tension, the response states. Those are the 3 most important layers of the ChangeGrid that we will routinely use when working with an individual client. On Friday, we'll be doing 2 additional sessions. In the morning, we'll be talking about action planning. How do you go about crafting the right desired locations? How do you go about moving people not only up grid and down grid, but how about in grid and out grid? And how about moving them to the center of the grid? So we'll be talking about a lot more sophisticated maneuvers, ChangeGrid maneuvers that you can use for action planning. And then, of course, it's very important for us to help you blend this in with your current practice. And so in session 4, we'll be talking about several ways that you can easily integrate the ChangeGrid into your current way of operating and do it in a way that not only would provide your clients with greater levels of insight, but also provide you with greater levels of income. And so we want to make sure that you have all of your questions answered about the best way to integrate this material. So let's get going by answering this question. What exactly is performance coaching? When someone asks us, what is ChangeWorks and where does it fit in? How does it align with coaching? What's really going there? We want people to recognize that the kind of coaching we tend to focus on is performance coaching. Now, you can use the ChangeGrid for any kind of coaching that you happen to be doing. You can use it for any sort of training work you're doing or individual counseling. You can use it for anything you want. But when someone asks us, how is it used by the majority of our professionals, they use it as a tool for performance coaching. Now, performance coaching is all about that word performance. It's all about identifying what it is that someone needs to do. It's all about helping them to understand how ready they are to do that, to explore how engaged they are in doing the things that need to be done. It predicts how likely they are to actually follow through and do what needs to be done. And it tells us what type and level of support we're going to need to put in place in order to really help that person stay on track for doing what needs to be done. And you've heard me emphasize the word do, 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 do. When we are looking at a change grid, we're past those discussions about what does somebody want and why do they want it, and all that wonderful sorts of stuff that people might be working on the side of perhaps life coaching or career coaching, or what a manager might be doing with helping one of their employees get their thoughts together about what their professional track is going to be. So we assume there's been all sorts of other sorts of discussions. The change grid comes into play when you are now ready to say, all right, what's the action plan? What does this person really need to be doing? How are they going to go from where they are right now to where they want to be? And as we start to answer those questions, we start to build a list of mission critical activities, specific behaviors that this individual is going to need to perform and perform well if they want to excel at reaching whatever their desired state happens to be. So when you hear us talk about performance coaching, that's what we're really talking about. And again, when we are teaching corporate clients how to use this, they're completely about performance. Quite candidly, the only thing they seem to be interested in is the bottom line. And so they want to know, how is it that we can enhance someone's productivity so that we can or enhance their performance so that we can boost productivity so that we can boost profits. It's all these P words going on. They want to work on that. The thing they don't seem to work on, in fact, is potential. I think that when it comes to talking to someone about what their potential is, now we're either looking at the exceptional organization or we're looking at people that are in private practice, like you. And so the change grid can be used with any of those P words. It's here to support someone in exploring their potential, helping their performance, boosting their productivity, and ultimately, it's going to impact whatever those profits happen to be. Okay, so now, well, with that, let's take a little look at where performance coaching actually begins. Performance coaching begins when someone recognizes that they have a problem they need to solve, a need that they want to satisfy, or an opportunity they would like to seize. Now, depending on your specific practice, you might focus on just one of these three. We have professionals among the ranks of the ChangeWorks community that are focusing entirely on helping their clients to identify and solve actual problems that they're confronted by, while others are the other end of things, not really troubling themselves with people's temporary ick, but instead going like, what do they want to become? What do they want to do? Focusing on helping them to seize that opportunity. You can do either you can use the change grid effectively within any of these situations. But the moment I go like, oh, I got a problem to solve, now the question is, all right, then what are we going to need to do? I've got a need to satisfy. All right, what are we going to need to do? You want to seize an opportunity, what do you need to do? And so it's going to be really focusing on the do parts. That's what performance coaching is really all about. So hopefully that answers your questions that many of you had about what exactly is this thing called performance coaching and where does it really fit in with what we're trying to do. All right, so with that, let's get into a little bit more detail about using the ChangeWorks system. In just a few moments, I'll be going online and we'll actually start to craft an activity list designed for an individual. But before we do that, just want to touch base on a couple of things with you. In the ChangeWorks system overall, we start off by exploring the client situation. We walk this path of self-discovery, and I want to make sure you guys understand what that model is all about. We're trying to define activities. What are the activities that we really do want to be plotting here? And so the other ones, steps 3 through 6, we'll talk about a bit later. But this morning, I want to focus on very much this walk along the path of self-discovery as a way of extracting activities that the client might find very, very useful in exploring on a change grid. So with that, Let me just remind you from your Mastering Personal Change program that activities is just a collective term. It can be populated with tasks that are on your plate or goals you want to work on, different alternatives or options you have available to you, different people, relationship sorts of interactions, all kinds of things can be plotted in on the activity list. And I said to you that the only thing that's really important is that the activities are stated as verbs. Again, we're getting back to that whole doing thing. What does someone need to do? Well, today we're going to take it a lot deeper than that. And what I want to do is go over 13 points on how to craft the perfect activity list. So let's go through these 13 little suggestions on how to craft a better activity list. Oh, let's see. A question coming in. If you have a chance, would you consider sharing your view of the probably outmoded concept of change resistance? Thanks. Yeah, from the nature of change, let me go ahead and address that. The nature of change. We hope that we have established that resistance is not about change itself. Resistance is about how someone frames that change in terms of how it will impact their sense of control. So human beings are not resistant to change itself. They're resistant to losing control. So as they assess whatever this change may be, if they come to the conclusion that by making that change, they will lose some critical resources, positioning, whatever, they will lose control, then nature will tell them, don't do that. So nature will tell them to resist that. On the other hand, if they believe that by making the change, they will gain a greater level of control or maintain the level of control they currently have, they are very likely to proceed. Now, whether they can actually do it or not has other factors. So, do they have the resources that are required? Do they have enough attention to pay attention to it right now? They have to have other elements there, but that's kind of like the prerequisite for the change to occur is the person has to feel as though by making the change they will gain a greater level of control or maintain the control they have at present. So for us, it's not about the change. In fact, how many people do each of you work with that come to you because they already have a change in mind? They're not resisting the change at all. They're the ones that are advocating for the change. They're the ones that are, initiating this whole thought process. And so, this belief that people are resistant to change, or this phrase about change resistance, I just think it's looking at entirely the wrong thing. It isn't about change. Human beings happen to be exceptional at change. It's about control. Do we feel like we are going to gain or lose control? And so I would say that the concept would probably be most accurately updated to say instead of being change resistance, it's a loss of control resistance. So I want to resist anytime I think I'm going to lose control. And let me say that again. I want to resist whenever I think I'm going to lose control. That's how I stay, a happy, healthy, well-adjusted human being. And again, as we talked about during the nature of change, even if you feel that by making a change you could gain control, you still may not do it if you don't have enough tension to prompt you to take action if you're not at that threshold of activation. So let's get into these 13 kind of best practices for creating a perfect individual activity list. Now, first thing, the first word of every activity must be a verb. Never forget that an activity is something that somebody actually does. So be very clear about what the client needs to do. Now, again, depending on your relationship with the client, you might phrase it a different way. So now, in my role as a coach, my way of labeling it might be, what does the client want to do, or what does the client feel the client needs to do? But in my role as a trainer, I would probably say, you need to do X. And whether the person agrees or disagrees with me is a totally different discussion. In my role as a trainer, my job is to tell you what it is that you need to do differently. So you can phrase the same way you want, but when you are crafting the activity list, the first word of every activity must be a verb. And we'll get pretty strict about that one. Next thing, focus on verbs that are associated with external behaviors, not internal processes. So I'll go ahead and read what's here, and then I'll explain it for you in more detail. External, observable, measurable activities are far more likely to plot in meaningful areas of the change grid than internal, subjective processes like understand or feel or believe, which will invariably plot downgrid. And so think about this. If I say to you that the activity is for you to understand why X is so important to you. If I ask you, how do you rate your ability to understand why something's important to you? Are you guys likely to rate your ability to understand something as high, moderate, or low? Go ahead and tell me. Go ahead and type me an answer. Are you likely to rate your ability to understand something as high, moderate, or low? What's your just kind of initial reaction when it comes to the verb understand? Okay, yep. So your ability to understand something really, yeah, I'm an intelligent person. I can understand. I can understand. Some of you guys are saying, well, it depends. And so maybe that would be moderate. We just don't have people who rate their ability to understand something as low. In 32 years of using the tool, I can't think of a time I've ever met with someone who actually said that their capacity to understand something was low. They might say it's new to them, or they might say this is a stretch for them, but they don't say that they have a low ability to do it. And then the next question is, how challenging is it for you to understand something? And again, people are going to say, well, the challenge of understanding something is really pretty low, maybe moderate if it's complex. But, we don't often hear people label the challenge of understanding something being very high. Now, that same thing applies when we talked about feel, believe, etc. These things have a tendency to draw out of the respondent an answer that says they believe their ability is moderately high to high and the challenge is moderately low to low. And so all internal processes seem to end up plotting down in power, apathy, and apathy. And so you could do that and you could explore that however you really want. But the question is, does that really get to the core of what's going to help this person actually do what needs to be done? And so what we really want to do is to focus on the external behavior. So if I said to you, if you truly understood what was most important to you about whatever the case may be, what external behavior could I ask you to perform that would prove to me that you do have that understanding? So now it's a little bit more about, and again, you guys are throwing me some answers already. Well, they need to be able to articulate it. Maybe they need to explain it. They need to share it. Well, now I'm using a different verb when I say share your understanding of dot dot dot, or if I say articulate what's most important to you about dot dot dot. People may now rate these things in a very different sort of way. Yeah, very very different way. Okay. Yep. So, right, exactly, Betty. Write about your experience. We want them to tell us about what it is they've done in the past, what they're doing right now, what they think they need to do in the future. What do they need to start doing, stop doing, continue doing? Again, you keep hearing that do word come up, and I get it. We are human beings, not human doings. But when we're talking about people making changes in their life, there's things that are going to need to be done, and so this tool focuses on those items. Next one. Each activity should contain only one verb. Now, multiple verbs in a single activity confuses the respondent. So I'll give you an example of this. If I said to you that part of your job is to um, write and deliver a speech, and I ask you, how do you rate your ability to write and deliver a speech? Right now, do you go like, well, that's easy to answer? Or do you go like, well, that's two different things. My ability to write a speech and my ability to deliver a speech could be very different. And if I said to you, well, let's talk about challenge. How challenging is it for you to write and deliver a speech? Well, are you answering that based on some hodgepodge of those two? Or are you going like, well, no, the challenge associated with writing a speech is very different than the challenge that I would associate with delivering that speech. And so, do you guys recognize and chime in on this? Because I think this is a really important, concept to get in. That if we put multiple verbs into a single activity, we really don't know what the person is actually answering when they're answered that question. Which verb did they pick, or did they create some intermediary kind of verb and answer based on that? Okay, so You want to make sure that as you're crafting the activity list, that each activity contains only one verb. Now you can have multiple activities, and so if you want to have one line item for write the speech and another line item for deliver the speech, that's great. But then again, we're going like, yeah, these are both very important things to look at. Okay, any questions about this idea about each activity should contain only one verb? One verb. Okay, let's talk about a few more. We're going to encourage you to favor powerful verbs. Weak, tentative, or intermediate verbs are less likely to move the client into optimal growth mode. Eliminate is a far more powerful verb than reduce. And so, let's say this person is in a relationship with someone and they've got conflict. I might say to them, I want them to reduce the conflicts that they have with someone. Or do I want them to eliminate those conflicts? Do I want them to prevent those conflicts? What is the actual outcome I'm looking for? Or are we really going to be happy that they reduce it? Or should we set a goal that they do what needs to be done to not only reduce it, but prevent it from even happening? So to anticipate and do that. And so we really want to favor the most powerful verb that we can do. Um, Gil is sharing that as a coach, I generally avoid asking any question that refers to multiple actions, preferences, etc. Exactly. We want to make sure that we are capturing that in the crafting of the activity list as well. Um, Powerful verbs. Now, as we talk about creative ways of using the change grid, there will be many times when I will say to you that you might even want to build a change grid out of impossible verbs. Like if we said instead of reducing the turnover rate of key employees, we said we wanted to eliminate that. Well, what's the chances that any company is ever going to eliminate the turnover of key employees? So sometimes we even put together one based on with expectations that are totally unrealistic just to see what someone's mindset is about attacking the plan overall. Our thought being there that if someone feels um, very confident about their ability to eliminate something, they're going to do a far more effective job of reducing it than someone who doesn't think that they have those strengths. So favor the powerful verbs whenever you can. Next one, number 5, each activity should contain only one object. So similar to multiple verbs, multiple objects confuse the respondent. And so if I said something like, write a speech for the ICF chapter meeting and the Chamber of Commerce. So now, am I writing one speech that I'm going to deliver to both places? Or am I writing speeches for each of those things and it's different speeches? And if that's the case, then which one am I answering? Because how I feel about writing a speech for the ICF event could be very different than how I feel about the writing a speech for a chamber event. So it could be very different things. And so we want to be very careful that each activity has only one verb and only one object. Now, one thing we did discover very early on is that people who have a strong background in HR tend to do something we call activity packing. Activity packing is when they craft a single sentence and then inside of that sentence, there are multiple verbs and multiple objects. And so they will say things like understand, define, and deploy initiatives for retail, online sales, and business to business. Okay, that might be suitable for a job description, but that's not one activity. That's 6 activities, maybe more if I really do the math. Maybe it's 9 activities, I don't know. But it's just packing. We don't want to do that. Each activity should have one verb and one object. One object. Number 6, limit the list to mission critical activities. Don't clutter the activity list with mission incidental or minor procedural tasks. So, for example, let's say that you are talking to your client, and the client is looking for a job promotion, and they are working with you to help them get prepared to go in front of the powers that be and make their case for getting the promotion or whatever it is they really want. Well, We have to ask ourselves, well, what are all the activities that person's going to need to do? Well, if we just start rattling off the list, they're going to need to set up a meeting. They're going to need to prepare for that meeting. They're going to need to anticipate what the roadblocks are that they may need to overcome in the minds of the people attending that meeting. They may need to do an inventory of all of the great strengths they have that would make them appropriate for that promotion. They need to anticipate any pushback they might get from any particular individual, prepare themselves accordingly. And so, as I start to rattle off all of the things that someone may need to do, to get that promotion or whatever, some of those things are mission critical, and some of those things are mission incidental or minor procedural tasks. So, for example, I said, meet with the powers that be. Well, meeting with the powers that be isn't very likely to change anything. Meeting with them is not the mission critical part. Yes, I have to meet with them, but meeting with them doesn't change anything. I've got to do something during that meeting that's going to effectively produce the outcome that I'm looking for. Those are the mission critical activities. This act about scheduling the meeting, attending the meeting, getting dressed for the meeting, driving to the office. These things are mission incidental. And while it is very possible for you to plot them on a change grid, I just don't know that that's going to bring the client the depth of insight that you really want to be looking for. Perhaps the biggest reason, though, why we want to avoid cluttering up the activity list is that every activity is going to require the respondent to stop for a moment and give some thought to that activity and then answer 4 questions based on that activity. Every activity then ends up taking someone, oh, how about if they're really fast about the thing, 15 seconds, 30 seconds to think through and respond. If you've got a lot of clutter, it adds up. And we want to make sure that we have an activity list that is something that is efficient in using our clients' time and energy. Okay, any questions so far about these first 6 advice points? Okay. All right. Now, number 7, be as specific as possible in the phrasing of each activity. Now, in the Mastering Personal Change program, we don't stress this about things about being too specific. We talk about it only briefly, but when it comes to really crafting an activity list for another person, we want to make sure that we are very clear about what it is that we want someone to do. And I'll show you a specific example of this in just a few moments. But if I said to them, well, what is your goal? And they said, well, my goal is to sell more. Okay, I can put the word sell more on an activity list. It's got a verb, it's got an object, although more is kind of a feeble object. Nevertheless, sell more. Um, well, what happens if I decide to get a lot more specific? Sell more what? Sell how many more what or how much more what? And sell how much more what by when? So I think it's really important that we apply, the things you learn about SMART goals and anything like that to help someone get real clarity around what it is that they want to do or what it is they need to be doing to do that. Okay, so be as specific as possible in the phrasing of each activity. I would much rather that you err on the side of being overly specific than on the side of being overly general. And again, you can do that easily because you're creating an activity list for a specific individual. And so I think it's much easier to get really, really specific with an individual than it is with a group. Um, Advice point number 8. Whenever possible, use the client's own words. Remember that the activity list belongs to the client and needs to resonate powerfully with them. This is a really important philosophical point in using the change grid. We want our client to own their list. We don't want to impose upon any of our clients some set of activities that we pulled out of thin air or somebody just handed to us and said, here, use this. The best activity list is an activity list that has been co-created with the client. So we're helping the client to identify whatever those mission critical activities are. We're helping the client to be as specific as possible so they can get greater clarity around it. And we're helping the client keep that list really clean. So let's use the client's own words. We don't need to substitute whatever their jargon is with our own jargon. That's not important when it comes to crafting an activity list for an individual client. Now, as we start to do activity lists for research purposes, or we start doing group profiling, I'll give you a couple of exceptions to that, but the spirit will always be the same. Whenever possible, let's use the client's own words. Okay. Next thing, stick to one tense throughout the entire activity list. And people do think this is insignificant, but it does help the person to stay in, keep their mind in a certain mode. And I'll give you just a quick example of this, and then I'll demonstrate it as we're crafting the activity list. I could say something like, write a speech, and or I could say something like delivering a speech. Well, write and delivering are in different tenses, and I won't take you through the grammatical nightmare of identifying what specific tense they each are. So I try to make it really easy with everyone. You're either going to ing it or you're not. And so if you've decided to ing it, you're going to go writing a speech, delivering a speech. If you don't want to ing it, you can't use any ings at all. You want to write a speech, deliver a speech, but you don't want to mix it all up. So whichever verb form you choose, and it doesn't really matter which one you choose, although some members of our ChangeWorks community would debate that for you. We really want you to just choose one tense. It's either going to be that simple present tense, or it's going to be the gerund. And so we really want to focus on one tense in order to help that person keep their mind in a single frame as they're filling out the activity list. Questions, comments about any of these three? Okay, a few more to go, and then we'll get into crafting one. Number 10, don't be stingy with the number of activities on the list. There's a reason why we set up the ChangeGrid to allow you to put up to 50 activities on a list. And quite honestly, I don't know that we've ever tested to see if it'll let us do number 51. But you know, we want you, as far as the best practice goes, to just keep your activity list robust enough to be really meaningful to the client, but don't go like extremely overboard. So we gave you this opportunity to come up with 50 so that you would actually use that capacity. Now there's a case to be made if you're using this for marketing purposes, that you keep the activity list short, because in a marketing situation, the person who's filling it out might only be willing to give you 2 or 3 minutes of their time. And so let's really hone in on just a handful of truly mission critical activities. But if they're already one of your clients, or you're using this as an intake tool, they'll give you a half an hour of their time filling out a bit of a self-assessment to help them understand themselves better. So you can do 50 activities in a half an hour without much difficulty there. So we don't want you to think like, oh, I can only do 6 or 8 activities. No. Create enough activities that you get a really good understanding of what's going on with the client. Just be sensitive to the thought that every activity takes time for them to complete, and we do want to understand that fatigue might slip in at a certain point. Okay, let's see, questions? Nope, so far so good. All right, number 11, have the client craft their own activity list. And now, I don't mean you want to give them full access to your account, but as I show you how to use the individual ChangeGrid system, you are able to set up a ChangeGrid in such a way that when your client receives it, they can add activities to their own list. You can even send them a totally blank activity list and say, hey, you go ahead and create your own activity list. Obviously, you would need to spend some time talking with your client about what makes for a decent activity. But you can certainly ask them to participate in crafting that activity list. Yep. Okay. Let's see. Yep. Number 12. Review the activity list with your client before you deploy it. And so I think that if you're going to be crafting an activity list for a client, it's always good to send them the activity list that you have settled on at the end of your interviews with them, discussions with them, etc., and just see if there's anything they want to change. once you have deployed the ChangeGrid, you cannot easily change the activity list. You can still work with it, but there's things that make it a bit more complex. So we just want to make sure people are happy with the list before they go through all the trouble of filling it out. And then the last one is we want you to very much expand your understanding of the sources for suitable activities. Many of you are already using a variety of psychometric instruments. Those psychometric instruments often give people a report, and in that report, there are many suggestions about behavioral changes they could make to help them become more flexible, more easily understood, etc. But we could just lift things directly from that report and say that, like, for example, if someone's taking the disc profile and they test out as being very, very high on D, maybe one of the suggestions that's made to them is to be a bit more sensitive to gathering other people's input before decisions are made, or becoming a better listener, or not showing impatience when they are talking to someone like that. So, there's usually there's a litany of suggestions that can come out of that. Sometimes we just take someone's job description and immediately just cut and paste it into the ChangeGrid. Or if they're working on a project, there's already a detailed action plan about who's going to be doing what. Great, let's just harvest that. So there are countless places that you can go to that will give you fantastic activity lists. You just need to make sure as you explore those that you try to apply some of these guidelines. So do make sure there's only one verb and one object per activity. Try to focus on the most powerful verbs. Try to focus on external behaviors rather than internal responses. So just some guidelines there. Okay. So these are our 13 little suggestions for crafting a better activity list. Does anyone have any questions, comments about anything we've covered so far? All right. Then what I want to do is move into actually crafting the activity list. So here's how this is going to work. I'm actually going to now go to the ChangeWorks system. So you're going to need to log in, and all of you can do this now if you would like, but we're going to be, I'm going to be showing you a sample on the screen as we work our way through this, but I want you to get comfortable with this. Your username, again, is your first name and last name. That has not changed. All of you should have fully functioning accounts at this point in time because you've already gone through mastering personal change, and so you've been set up for that. So you should be able to log in with your first name and last name, no spaces, no capitals, no punctuation, just your first name, last name. And your password is password unless you chose to change it. If you chose to change it, I hope you remember it because we've got no way of telling you what your password is. From an administrative control perspective, we can reset your password back to password, but you'd have to then, go and, put in your new password or all that. So that's it. So right now you should all be able to log in using your username and password. And when you do that, you end up arriving at this little, little home page for the ChangeWorks system. Now, on the home page here, under dashboard, we're going to be looking at a couple of these other options. Now, up to now, you've probably only looked at my personal ChangeGrid. And again, that's the ChangeGrid that you should be running for yourself. Use it as your personal to-do list. It's a great way to keep track of not only what needs to be done, but a great way to keep your readiness level right in front of you to do those things. But what we want to do is start to create a profile. Now, when we're creating a profile, it takes us into a totally different engine. Lots of things we can do in the name of creating a profile. So here's a few of the basic things. All profiles must be named. So what do you want to call the profile? And so let's, I'm going to come up with it's kind of a basic example. Let's say we're helping someone with a job search. So we'll call this job search for James. And James is my client. Now you can put anything there you really want, and you can change this at any point you want to change the title of it. Just know that every profile needs to have a name. So when you come back to your system and you're looking at all the grids you've done, you'll be able to find the profile that you've created. Now you can also choose a profile type. Right now, you guys have all been set up to be able to access the individual profiling engine. Even if you don't have a license, when you're in class, we want you to be able to play with this feature. And so we've unlocked this access for all of you. If you end up going through to level 2, we'd unlock the group one for you as well. So right now, you guys should be able to define this as an individual profile. Now, the next little section here, you see it says tags. People who use the ChangeWorks system a lot create lots and lots of profiles. And sometimes they just want to go like, did I ever create a profile about sales? Or let me show, I want to see all the activity lists I've ever created about leadership. And so you can create tags that allow you to code any profile any way you want. There's no limit to the number of tags you want to create. To create a new tag, you click on add new tag and it will. So I'll just show you this. The new tag is going to be leadership. Actually, I'm going to even add another one. Since this is about job search, let's do one on job search. Okay, so you can do as many of them as you want. Now, you are going to decide which tags do you want to attach to this profile. And for this one, I'm going to go like this is an individual job search. That's all I really want for this one. You don't have to use the tagging system at all if you don't want to. In fact, on your systems, it should probably be blank right now. So if you want to tag things, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. All right, now under that, there's a couple of default profile settings that you can make. So let's understand what each of these are all about. Do you want to receive a notification when your client completes this profile? That's what this is asking you. If you would like the system to send you an email letting you know that one of your clients has just completed the ChangeGrid, you just click yes, and the system will send you an email. And then the second thing here is that do you want to allow your respondent to add their own activities? Or do you just want to say, nope, this is the activity list, you can't change it? If you want to allow them to add activities, go ahead and click on yes. And I tend to do that as a default. In fact, I really should um, have the developers just set that up officially because I think, what harm can it do if we ask them to add their own activities? They might come up with something really interesting. So I tend to default to that. But if you don't want them, just choose no, and life will go on just fine. Okay, now once you've done those few very basic settings, none of them are all that difficult. Just name the thing, call it an individual profile. You can now begin to build the activity list. And so I'm about to put all of you guys to the test. What I'd like you to do is to give me your idea of an activity you might put on a job search for James activity list. What does James need to do in order to find and land that new job for himself? So give me some ideas. Go ahead, type me some sort of activities you think might go well on this list. And while you're doing that, of course, if I'm talking to James, I say, so James, what do you think you need to do? And no doubt he'll come up with a great many of the things that all of you guys are sharing with me. Okay, so here we have, and I'm just going to go ahead. Here's one from Ronnie. Rather than type it, I just cut and pasted it. So create a list of networking contacts. Great. I'm going to add another one. Let me come over here. Oops. Where'd my little thing go? There it is. Oh, wow. You guys are sending some amazing ones. Okay. Let's go ahead and copy this one. This is from Gil. Build an effective LinkedIn profile. Let's add another one. Oh, I like this one from Betty. Let's copy this. She suggests write about 5 success stories you're most proud of. And by the way, I cut and pasted it. We need another S here for success. You can just go in there and add it whenever you want. And one other thing, and this is just me being anal retentive. Do you put a period at the end of each activity or not? I like to do them without the periods, but whatever you choose, just do it. I just think it makes it look more clean and more professional. I try to make sure everything is spelled correctly, that I'm not starting things with a lowercase letter sometimes and capitals other times. Just recognize you're creating a document and it is a reflection on you. And so let's keep things nice and clean and consistent. So they just, really has that element of polish to it. Let's see. Christina is suggesting this. Let's copy this one. This is going back to that related with the LinkedIn profile. Search your LinkedIn contacts. She's also suggesting that we update the effective LinkedIn profile. That's kind of a variation on this one. So, and how about this one? Create a resume focused on a targeted position. So let's go ahead and add that one. Now, again, we could keep on building activities, but these are some really good ones you guys have suggested. And thank you, everyone else, for the other ones you've provided. But I think we got enough to kind of do our work right now. Okay, so now I can keep on adding them and adding and adding them. And anytime I want, I can click on Save the Changes, and the system will just kind of lock it all in for me. Notice it's going like you want to add in number 6 now. Now, one thing I didn't talk to you about was this other block here under description. The description block allows you to give as much detail as you would like about a particular activity. So when you say something like, write about 5 success stories you're most proud of, I could go in and edit that right now if I wanted to. Just a second, edit it. Thank you. And here I could just say, uh, something like, maybe a note to the person: you mentioned your leadership role for um, Habitat for Humanity. Maybe there's something there I want to suggest to them just as a little reminder. Maybe I need to give them a little bit of definition about this. So let me go ahead and save the changes I made there. Now I can come up here and say, create a list of networking contacts. Be sure to include your family, friends, colleagues, business, um, school, chums. Okay, so you can put anything there you really want. So now when you are doing group profiling, the description block becomes more and more important because you want to make sure that every person who is responding interprets the activity the exact same way. And so sometimes that description block can be very useful to you in giving people enough information to have clarity around what it is you really want them to do. Now, all that said, while you have the ability to put in these descriptions, I will tell you that when it comes to doing individual profiles, I rarely use the description feature because the activity, is being co-created with the client. I assume that they know what they meant by that activity. And if that's too much of an assumption, then I can use the description block to add a little bit of clarity to remind them of something that we might have been chatting about. Okay, so point is, you can use this description block to add as much detail as you want. One other thing I'll show you while we're here is, you see how we've got build an effective LinkedIn profile as activity number 2 and search LinkedIn contacts is number 4. Let's say for whatever reason you wanted those to be closer together. You can point to any activity and you can slide it into any role position you want, and the system automatically renumbers things for you. So you can rearrange these however you want. I'm just going to finish by, we'll remove that last one. I'll go ahead and save the changes. It gives me another one anyway. Okay, so anyway, have any questions about what we've done so far? So far, so good. Okay. Now, over here on the right, you see 4 columns for desired ratings. The desired ratings are not what your client's responses are. We haven't asked them to fill it out yet. What we're asking right now is, do you as the professional have a sense of where this activity could be plotted on the change grid for maximum effectiveness? So where would be the ideal location? What would the desired ratings be? So, and we'll get into this in detail on Friday morning, how you go about determining the exact locations you would really want. But this allows you to put this information in right now about where you believe these activities would best be plotted. For now, we're just going to ignore this altogether. We'll come back to that on Friday to make sure you understand it. Now, in addition to the activities, you can also add free text questions. Free text questions are any question that's open-ended. So you could say to them here, what were any moments of great insight, you had while completing this profile? I would probably have changed my, or fixed my my spelling. So I can write anything there I want, and then I can add another one. I can give them as many questions as I want, and it then asks them to do that. That means you can use the ChangeWorks system as a survey tool. So if you just want to ask a population a bunch of free text questions, you're just curious to get whatever their essay answers may be, this is an engine that allows you to do that. The other thing that you can do, and you can have as many of those as you really, really want. We'll ask it to save the changes I've made just so things are nice and clean. The next thing we do is demographic questions. In demographic questions, which by the way, are rarely used for individual profiles because usually we are asking these demographic questions so that we can sort the population into different subgroups. But we said let's go ahead and let people use demographic questions with with an individual profile, just in case you want to ask them something that's multiple choice. So, for example, one question we might ask James is, um, um, how about how satisfied are you with your current job prospects? Now, I could have asked that just as a free text question, but here I can give them some answers. I am unsatisfied. When you type it in, okay, on SATISFID, unsatisfied. Ta-da. I can add another answer, a potential answer, somewhat dissatisfied. Add another answer, on the fence. On the answer, another answer, I'm thrilled to be there. Okay. So, you can put anything you really want there. And when you're done, you've completed that particular question. You can have as many demographic questions as you want as well. So I can go ahead and save the changes that I've made. I could now add in another question with another set of demographics. There's no limit to the number of free text questions you can ask. There's no limit to the number of demographic questions you can ask. So if you got a creative way to use this just as a quick little survey tool, go ahead and use it for that. But it was really intended to be something we use with group profiling because those can get very complex when you've got hundreds of respondents to a certain activity list. You might want to divide them up and see how things look when you start slicing and dicing. Okay, now below that, we can put in the respondent information. You'll notice it says it's optional. At this point, I can put in my respondent's first name, last name, their email address, their phone number, their time zone, or I can ignore that altogether and the system will ask them to supply that information when they fill the profile out. So it's completely up to you. All you're really doing is saving them a little bit of time if you do this. And what I like to do is to leave it all blank so that in case they want me to use a different email address, they can put the email address in right here that they want me to use. Or if they've got a certain different phone number they want me to use, they can put it in rather than me pre-populating it for them. Okay, now, again, I'm going to leave it blank. Now I just save and continue the system. What the system now does, it says, all right, well, here's your summary. Here's your activity list. Those are all the activities. Those are the descriptions. No desired ratings have been put in place yet. Those are the free text questions and the demographic questions you chose to give it. And that's the respondent information. You chose to leave it blank. And there you go. So now that's the summary. Now, the most important thing is that at the end of it, it's going to say to you, here is the link for this profile. You would then cut and paste this link into an email and send it to your client and say, hey, I put together a ChangeWorks profile for you. Here's the link to it. Now, we used to have the system automatically send the link to your client. But what we discovered was two things. Number one, a great many of the email services that people use view an automatically generated email coming from a piece of software as potential spam. And so it creates all kinds of problems with that. And then the other thing is that we also found that it made it, how do I say, it made it very difficult for us to provide any kind of private message to the client. So if I wanted to give them a little bit more messaging around this link or this profile, or I just wanted to be a little bit more social with them and say, hey, it was really great talking to you earlier today. Thank you particularly for showing blah, blah, blah. The system didn't give you an opportunity to put that personal message in there. And so The decision was made by the ChangeWorks professionals that they would rather just have the system give them a link that they can then cut and paste and put into any kind of an email message that they would want to send to their client. And so that's what we've done now. Right there is the link to it. All right, does anyone have any questions about what I've shown you so far? Or is this easy enough, intuitive enough? Okay, great. Now, I'm going to scroll to the top of the page for a second. I just want you to see what's happened now. If I click on dashboard and again look at now, instead of create a profile, I'm going to go, I'd like to view profiles. That's now going to show me a list of all the profiles that I've ever done. And I could do all tags. I could just choose a particular tag or whatever it may be. I can apply this kind of filtering to it. Quite honestly, we've been using this software now for, oh, I don't know, a good 3 years plus, and I've never done that. I've never filtered my profiles, mostly because I keep it clean. If I don't want to keep one, I'll get rid of it. So, but here at the top of the list, we now have the profile names, job search for James. It's an individual profile that was created on April 1st. It has never been completed, so I don't have any responses to it, and there's some actions I can take around it. And you can see all the other profiles that I am currently using here. I've got a profile even up to 216 people, so group profile, etc. So this is a complete list of those profiles. Now, one thing I will show you while we're here is that if you wanted to get that link again over here, if you again click on view profiles, then here's job search for James, and here it says get the link. And if I click on get the link, it just gives it to me right there. So it gives me a very convenient place to get that link again. Okay, now with that, let's talk a little bit about what James would do. So now I'm going to go ahead and just click on this link for a second. It is an active link, so bypassing the email. But now this is what James would see when he clicked on that link and says, okay, you've been invited to complete a change grid. So what's your first name? And I say, my name is James Whitaker. My email address is me at nowhereinparticular.com. And my phone number is 987-654-3210. And the time zone is Eastern time zone. We find this very handy so that we don't end up calling people too early and dragging them out of bed. So you just put information in there. The system is, just looking for the detail to be present. And then we have to click on I accept the terms. Now, don't anyone be afraid by our terms. If you click on the terms word there, you'll see the system opens up a little bit and it says, there's our terms. This is it, 4 paragraphs. That's all there is to it. We protect people's privacy. We don't collect anything. I mean, you give us your name and your phone number and your email so that we can contact you with the results, but we don't collect anything. We don't sell it. We don't do anything with it. We just don't do anything with it. And so it's not consolidated into a master database. None of that's happening. It's just that. So if people want to know what are our terms, right there are the terms. So there's nothing magical going on around it. And so once they do that, they can now continue to complete the change grid. Now, when they arrive to complete the change grid, the system gives them complete instructions. So here's how to complete your personal ChangeWorks survey. It tells them it's not a test. We ask them to rate 4 different areas. So here's how we define the size of the activity, ability, challenge, importance. And so we're giving them a full description about what each of those dimensions is all about. And then we let them start getting into the profile itself. And so that's their information. They've done all that. Here's the activities. Now we're asking them to rate themselves. So Stephen, are you on the call? I think you are. If you want to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'm just going to throw some numbers in. So, create a list of networking contacts. Okay, how big of a task do we think that is? So I'll be James. I think that's quite a bit of work. I haven't done that. I don't have it all in one place. That feels like that's a decent amount of work. I'm going to give it a 6 for size. My ability to do it is very high. I'll give it a 10. The challenge, well, where is everything? Ooh, I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty challenging. I'm going to give the challenge. You know what? I don't really think it's going to be all that big of a deal. I'm going to give the challenge a 4. And the importance, okay, If you say so, I'll give it an 11. So, building an effective LinkedIn profile. Well, that doesn't sound like a very big piece of work. My ability to do that? Well, how about a 4? The challenge of doing that? That's pretty tough. I don't know how to make it effective. I'll give it a 10 for the challenge and the importance. I guess it's still up there. I'll give it a 10 too. Searching LinkedIn contacts. Well, that's another small task. Give it a 2. My ability to search those contacts, I've done that a lot, so I can give it an 11. The challenge isn't all that great, maybe a 3. And the importance of doing it, I just don't know that what I'm looking for is there. I'm going to give it only a 9 for that. Nah, not even that. I'm going to give it an 8. Write about 5 success stories that I'm most proud of. Wow, that sounds like a lot of work. So size-wise, I'll give that a good 9. My ability to do it, I'm a decent writer. I'll give it how about a 7? The challenge of doing it, this could be a bit of a stretch for me. I'll give that a 10. And the importance of doing it, I'm not so sure. I'll give that an 8 as well. And then create a resume focused on the targeted position. Wow, that scares me. That feels like a really big task. My ability to do that, not really all that good. The challenge is really high. I'll give it an 11. And the importance, I got to have that. I'll give that a 12. Okay, so this is again James filling out the profile. Free text questions. What were any moments of great insight you had while completing this profile? Well, you asked me to create a resume on a targeted position, but I don't have a targeted position yet. Okay, targeted. And who knows if they'll go in and correct their spelling or not, but call me crazy. I want things to be nice and tidy. All right, so, who knows what they're going to say there. And under free text questions, how satisfied am I with my current job prospects? Well, I'm on the fence. And so I answer my questions. I click on finish the change grid. Oh, by the way, notice on the fence has a lowercase o. That will drive me crazy. So let's finish the change grid. And now they see the message, or James sees the message. Thank you for completing the ChangeGrid profile. Your results have been sent to your ChangeWorks professional. Now, you're the ChangeWorks professional. You just received an email. You can now come back to your dashboard, look at view profiles, and lo and behold, now for job search for James, it says that it was completed on April 1st. There's one response, and now I can say, I'd like to see this change grid. So you can click on view the change grid, and now we come up with all the options here. So now, when you ask to view a change grid, the system asks you right now, do you want to put in the desired locations? Because you can now if you want to. Do you want to look at all the activities? In which case, click on select all. Do you only want to look at one of them? What do you really want to look at? And so I'm going to say I'd like to see all of them. Now, I can just click on view change grid, and it will show me on the screen, here is James' change grid. So he's got an activity up in stress. Let me make this slightly smaller. So let's be able to see the activity. So he's got one activity up here in stress, one in power stress, one in power apathy and apathy, and one in apathy. Yay! I was trying to do that as I was coming up with numbers. So to be realistic, but have something scattered all over the place. Now, if you're looking at the change grid on screen, you can change the background image whenever you want. So right now you're looking at the composite change grid. But maybe we just want to simplify things and say, I just want to see what's going on based on what I learned in mastering personal change. So what's going on with these response states? So I can just change the background to layer 1. And now all it did was swap out the background image. So now I can see I've got one in stress, one in stress, one in power apathy, and apathy. So got to check in with you guys a little bit. At this stage, you should be able to apply the knowledge base you have about these 5 levels of tension to understanding a little bit about what's going on with James. And so let's take a look at what's plotting up there in stress. Now, again, remember, stress sounds like this, and this is, I have the reference guide memorized, but I'll tell you what the reference guide says. It says that stress sounds like this. I know I need to do something, but I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. In fact, let's take a look at what that activity is. It is, by the way, about creating that resume. Activity number 5, create a resume focused on a targeted position. James has said, my ability is only a 2. The challenge is an 11. Now notice the number is red. The number symbol right there, red, means high importance. And the circle is also red. The circle being red means it's a large size. And so you are looking at all four dimensions here, even though it appears to be a flat diagram. So what do we think about this? James is up in stress about getting that resume put together. Now we look at activity number 2, which I believe was about the LinkedIn profile. Build an effective LinkedIn profile. James is saying, like, well, my ability to do that is a 4. The challenge is a 10. This is still a real stretch for me, but I'm not panicked by it. I'm not up in stress. I'm in power stress. So I know I need to do something. I know it's got to get done. So, I guess let me just go ahead and put it together. Now, notice he's also saying it's very important. That's why the number is red. In fact, I like that all the numbers are red. So at least James agrees that all these activities are important. But he says, this one is a green circle. That's a small size. It's not going to be a big task to get done. Coming down grid, activity number 4. Activity number 4, I believe, was about, writing my success stories. Notice in power, very close to power stress. And so we know that he's he's in a formative kind of stage, thinking about what needs to be written, what he could say, etc. So lots of good things happening there as far as power is concerned, feeling confident. But again, tension's going up. So he's starting to feel a little bit of that sense of urgency that was associated with power stress. It's starting to come into play. It's got activity number 1 down in power apathy. Activity number 1 was creating a list of networking contacts. So he's going like, oh, definitely have the ability to do it. Gave his ability a 10. And the challenge is a 4. So he's got 2.5 times the ability that this challenge seems to require. So can he do it? Absolutely. Only thinks it's a moderate size activity, so it's not a giant piece of work, and he thinks it's really important. So, but power apathy sounds like this. I know I need to do something. I just wish somebody else would do it. So again, activity number 4 was writing about those success stories. Oh, I'm sorry. Activity number 1 was about creating that list of networking contacts. And so, can he do it? Absolutely. Will he do it? Probably. He thinks it's really important, so that bodes well for that. Is it going to be the first thing that he's going to focus on? Not while it's down in power apathy. Let's see if I'm getting some comments here from people. Task 1, 2 tasks needs breakdown to choose targeted position, then create the resume. Exactly right. What Gil is referring to there is that activity number 5, create a resume focused on target position, is just fine as an activity, but we might want to add another activity. And by the way, right now, I can do that. So we're looking at a change grid on screen. This is a live grid. I can add another activity right there if I wanted to. And while I'm talking to James, I could say, okay, James, how would you rate this activity? And so this is always a living thing. If you said, do you want to be able to add activities to it? So we could definitely do that. I do that. Task 1 and task 5. Falling to the threshold of delegation. Exactly what Chris has pointed out here is that the person is getting very close to the threshold of delegation. That's about where we're willing to let go of something. And then just to finish this off, activity number 3, which was, I think that's contacting my LinkedIn, searching my LinkedIn contacts. Well, they're actually down in apathy about it. James is saying my ability is an 11. I can search things, and the challenge is only a 3. And so I've got almost 4 times the ability that the challenge at hand seems to require. So yeah, I can do it. Um, but it's not a big task. That's why the circle is green. But look, at least he considers it important. So what do you think the likelihood is that James is really going to do activity number 3 again, search the LinkedIn contacts while he's down in apathy about it? Now, you guys are absolutely right. It's even though it's only because it's important, might he get around to doing it? Now, I think that there's another issue we could be looking at, and that is searching the LinkedIn contacts the mission critical activity, or is it mission incidental? So, am I searching the LinkedIn contacts because the act of searching the contacts will get me what I want? Or am I searching the LinkedIn contacts because it's going to enable me to get what I really want? So, what I'm probably trying to do when I search my LinkedIn contacts is something more like identify X number of LinkedIn contacts who could potentially refer me to someone else or something like that. And then you can decide, do I even really want to put the incidental activity of searching LinkedIn, or do I just want to put the outcome one? So identify, X number of LinkedIn contacts who are in the position to refer me to someone who matters to me. And so, yeah. Okay, so you guys are understanding this. Good, good, good. All right, now, in just a short while, we're going to be taking our lunch break. When we come back, we're going to be looking at a couple of these other layers in detail. We're going to be looking at the different energies that someone has around the activities. So, are you a driver, an expressive, an amiable, an analytical? What's your primary and secondary energy around that? And then we're also going to take a look at engagement. So, how engaged is this person in doing it? So, interestingly enough, activity number 4 about writing those success stories, James is very engaged in doing that. So, he's got a very strong likelihood that he would follow through and do it, as long as we have the right activator in mind. We'll talk about activators a bit later as well. Um, but the other 4 activities, oh, look, up in awareness, upgrade awareness, or down in downgrade awareness. So awareness doesn't really do all that much. We need that awareness to become an intention and the intention to become engagement. And so we'll be talking about this layer in detail when we get back from our lunch break. Okay, so here's what you guys should have taken away from this morning session. The first thing is, and let me go back here. Let's go ahead. We wanted to create a new profile. I wanted to be sure that you had a sense of best practices for creating stronger activity lists. You don't have to do all 13 of the ones I gave you. I just wanted you to really think about an activity before you put it down. So let me check in with all of you. Have we gotten you thinking a little bit more about the quality of activities? Oh, Betty has an interesting observation here. She's wondering if we made that change, where would the person plot? I think it'd be interesting to observe if that change took him up grid, and I think we could predict that would be the case. See, searching the database is very far down grid. Because again, it's just a procedural sort of a thing. Do I have the ability to do it? Yeah. Is it difficult? No. It's not a big piece of work, and yeah, it's really important. So yeah, I'll get around to doing it or whatever. But the moment I change the activity and say, identify from that search 5 people, LinkedIn contacts who are in the position to give you a meaningful referral. Wow. I'll be James. My ability to really find those 5. Okay, how about a 7 and the challenge of doing it an 11? So I now plot someplace entirely different on the change grid because it's a different activity. Different activity. Okay, so again, getting some good feedback from you guys. So you're really seeing the info about that. Now, I wanted to also lead you through the mechanics, the steps of using the online system to create an individual profile. I just led you through the process, but hopefully you were able to see that there is kind of a logic to it. Each thing that we ask you to do in setting up a change grid is rather straightforward. It will lock in when you do your homework. Your homework between today and Friday's programs is to complete an individual profile with somebody, whether it's one for a friend or a family member, a client, a colleague. You can choose anyone you want, but we want you to actually create a ChangeWorks profile using the system. So you can kind of get that all locked in. And of course, as you do this, you're all welcome to give us calls. We're happy to give you any individual guidance you need so that you can become very comfortable using the system. So you can call us anytime you want at area code 704 987 6500. You'll also find that on the website. So lots of ways for you to contact us. Okay, so now we have just a few minutes left. So what I'd like to do is go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Let me get a couple things out of our way here. And I just want to talk about a couple of things that we mentioned briefly. This idea about taking a walk along the path of self-discovery. Now, this is a technique that we use in performance coaching. But there's nothing that's sacred about this. It's not like you have to use this approach. I just wanted to demonstrate an intake approach that helps us to identify different things we might plot. So basically, it's saying that when we're asking a client to walk the path of self-discovery, we're hoping that at the end of it, they will discover the wisdom within. They will discover what their own activities are. And so we just want to sequence our questions in a particular order. So we start by asking about their current situation, and we try to get whatever information we can about what's going on right now. What are they doing right now? How are they feeling right now? What's happening now? Then we want to know, what do they really want? What are their goals? And let's apply those little SMART principles to coming up with a really good goal. And let's ask them not only what they want, but why is it so important to them? So let's get a really good understanding, great clarity around their desired situation. Uh, no doubt, once we have a clear understanding of their current situation and a clear understanding of their desired situation, we will notice that there is a gap between these two realities. So, what are the obstacles? What stands between where this person is and where they want to go? So, central to performance coaching is doing this gap analysis or doing a root cause analysis. So, if you know where you're at and you know where you want to go, the big question becomes, why are you not already there? Well, the reason why you're not already at your desired outcome is because there is some obstacle or set of obstacles, real or imagined, that are in their way. Maybe it's only one, and maybe it's a really minor kind of a thing, but you have to ask yourself, if I know where I'm at and I know where I want to go, how come I'm not already there? And as you start to explore that, you start to identify the obstacles. Now, those obstacles could be real or imagined. So, for example, if I said to you, well, my goal is to become a neurosurgeon. Well, okay, right now I'm not even a doctor, and so I've got this issue. I have a roadblock. I have an obstacle I have to overcome. I've got to get that education, and so maybe it's a really big thing. Maybe it's really minor. Maybe it's real. So I have to get the education, or maybe it's just something of the mind. If I said, well, I don't really know that I've got the personality for being a doctor. I just don't think that people would ever dot dot dot. And I start to talk about these feelings that I have and this belief system I have around myself. Okay, this is all stuff that's in my mind. It's stuff I might be imagining, but it can still serve as a profoundly powerful obstacle in my forward movement. And so we think it's very, very vitally important that we ask this person to identify what they see is in their way. What has stopped them from getting there, or what obstacles do they anticipate they would need to address at some point in time. Now, we're not being negative. What we're performing here is logical negative assessment, but we're not being negative. One of the programs we're going to be doing for our community builders in the next couple of months is on pride-based leadership. Pride-based leadership is all about understanding how we get maximum performance out of an individual. And you can apply the techniques personally or you can apply them to other people. But under what conditions do we actually get maximum performance, productivity? Where does that really exist on the change grid? How do we make that happen? Well, central to that is being able to identify what, if any, obstacles are in the way. And maybe there are no real obstacles whatsoever. Maybe the only obstacle there is the person has a little drop of doubt that stands between where they are right now and where they could be if they could only eliminate that doubt. And so don't think that talking about obstacles is being negative. I'm not casting a negative light on anyone. I'm just saying X exists. Whether it exists in reality or exists in the mind, it's real enough that it can have a true impact on that. So let's identify what those things may be. Now, once we know where you want to go and we know what's stopping you from getting there, we can now move on to the solution. How are we going to address those obstacles so that we can get to our desired situation? If there aren't any obstacles, then how do I go about reaching the desired situation? I promise you there's always at least one obstacle. So what is it? What's this solution? I need to make sure that my solution, in order to be something that's real, that will actually work, it has to acknowledge that these obstacles do exist. It doesn't need to be frightened by the obstacles or anything. It just needs to say, okay, X exists. And how are we going to address press X. If it's real, what's our real solution going to be? And if it's all in your mind, then what's this solution of the mind going to be? But one way or another, we need to come up with that solution. And then finally, now that we have a solution, we want to go inward and ask the question, how does this feel to you? What do your instincts and intuition, what does your gut tell you about the solution, about the likelihood of it succeeding, etc.? And so we find that by walking the path of self-discovery, we are helping the person add some organization to their thinking that allows them to come up with their own activities that allows them again to discover the wisdom within. That's the whole point of the path of self-discovery. Help them discover the wisdom within. This little technique is central to all the work we do when it comes to influencing other people. So for example, next week for the community builders, we are offering Master Stream Essentials, which are these principles of tension management applied specifically to selling themselves more effectively. And one of the things that we will teach in that program is how you walk this path with a prospective client to help them to realize that they need to hire you. And then how do you use this with your existing client or your new client to help them get greater clarity around whatever the changes are that they want or need to make. So one more quick minute, and then it's the break. As we walk these steps of the path, we are identifying all sorts of things that could be plotted on the change grid. So when we're looking at the current situation, these tasks and responsibilities and relationships could all be put on a change grid. Or we go to the desired situation. Well, what are the goals and the objectives, the metrics? What are the benchmarks? What are these things? When I go to the obstacles, what are these problems? What are these limitations, these hurdles, the risks, the deficiencies? What's in the way? And ultimately, the solution is packed with all the strategies, all the skills, all the step-by-step procedural sorts of stuff. And each and every one of those things could go on a change grid. Now, finally, I don't want you to think that all of it goes on a change grid. It gets to be too much. So part of the art of using a change grid is learning what activities really are mission critical and which ones can be set aside.